So I think we got a great view of the entrepreneurial spirit of CA through a few examples of startups which were created here at the CA. And now we're going to discuss further about this spirit and the French startup ecosystem. To introduce this discussion, we have a great panel. We already listened to you, I remind you, Mathieu Charveria, CSO of Terranexus. Then we have Laurence Petit. You are Director for Innovation and Startups of CEA. Célia Hart, you are General Partner of Supernova Invest. Catherine Georges, Vice President of Paris-Saclay R&D site of Ipsen. And Corinne Blaché-Poisson, your General Manager at Amgen. As we listened to you just a few minutes ago and that you started explaining Terranexus, it's about 20 people today, and you got an IPO 3 years ago, and you are one of the most typical startup created in CA. You own a lot to CA. Can you tell us about this story together?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. So first of all, thanks to the CEA for this great opportunity to present the company and to present perhaps into more details the interaction that we've got with the CA that made us like the company we are today. So perhaps just a few years back, I was a PhD student in the CEA. We were working on prion disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, mad cow disease, and we were trying to understand how things work in the brain in this indication. And on this road, we identified a way to increase the efficacy of drugs active on neurons. And it was back in 2007 and 2008 at this time. And the CEA asked us what we would like to do with the technology, whether to find an industrial partner to which we might license the technology, or to create a company to try and build the case by ourselves. So we decided with Franck Mouton, which is our CEO, which was my boss at the CEA, to create the company. And it was quite a long road between 2008 and the creation of the company 5 years after that. And it was a road that was in which we were completely accompanied by the CEA in terms of funds to continue our research in the lab, with the help of course, the scientists from the CEA, with the help of Supernova Invest. We will hear Célia Hart, which was quite at the beginning of this road, always helpful to create the company and to give advice to go as far as possible. And we created the company in 2013. We were able to raise funds 1 year after that with Supernova Invest and other funds at this time. We continue to collaborate with plenty lab for the CEA. We've worked with SHFG. We will hear people from this lab during the day. We work with Neurospin as well. We've worked with Mirsen. We have a platform, R&D platform with Mirsen ongoing for the moment. We work with Grenoble CEA, Grenoble as well. So we continuously try to work with the CEA. And I think what is important is to see, as it has been detailed before, how the CEA is able to push innovation, to push drugs, to push targets as far as possible, and to be able to transfer the rights of use of those new technologies to industrial partners. And a few years after that, we went public through an IPO, still with the support of Supernova Invest. And the company continues to build its pipeline with different kind of collaboration. But I think the company, the partners that we always try and work with is the CEA, of course, as you know, since plenty of scientists are working on different fields. And constantly when we want to find kind of an innovation or a new technology, we try and seek whether or not this is supported by the CEA or not. So I think it's a great opportunity for me to thank the CEA for everything that has been put on the company and that explain where we are now in the company. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a great homage. I think it's a good transition. You're still hosted in CEA facilities, in Fontenay-aux-Roses. It proves the great connection with the institution. And by the way, you quoted Laurence several times because you're head of innovation division of CEA, and it includes in particular business creation activities. So you know very well Teramixus. It's a good example of what you try to enhance and to create here in CA.
Yes. Hello, Fabrice. Hello, everybody. And maybe thank you first to the organizers, and in particular Iris, for this quite exceptional opportunity to talk about startups at CA. Indeed, maybe as an introduction, I would like to provide some key messages about startups, and it's really in relation with what has been said before. First key message is that startups at CA are really a long story, and I think we can say that CA has been a forerunner in this field. You mentioned it in the introduction. The first startup was created in 1972.
50 years ago. It's a great birthday.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
50 years ago.
We have today more than 220 startups at CA. From 1985, we structured our spin-off activities in order to provide favorable reshoring conditions for our researchers, to help them creating their business. And in 1999, something which is also very important for us, is that we created a specific subsidiary called CE1 Investissement, subsidiary which has the ability to support financially our startup, and which is this subsidiary is today operated by Supernova Invest, with whom we have a strong collaboration today. So first message, really a long story in terms of startups. Second key message maybe about our positioning on startups. Our startups are around three main areas: digital, energy, and health, as fair nexus. And most of our spin-offs are based on major breakthrough technologies with strong societal impact. And maybe a last and third message about our startups. We create not that many startups, 6 to 10 startups a year, but something which is to me very important is that we have a very qualitative portfolio. For instance, we have a 5-year survival rate of over 90%, which is rather exceptional. And well, we have several examples of new startups in the videos before. Maybe I can quote some successful startups in the health field as well. So of course we have Fear and Access. We have also Diabeloop, which is a startup specialized in an automated system to deliver insulin to treat type 1 diabetes. We have also Remedy Labs, which is a specific bracelet with an endorphin stimulator to treat chronic pains. And SkyMap Biotherapeutics to develop antibodies for oncology applications.
Good. We'll go back to on some of these startups, but I see that there are already a few questions which are asked through the platform, so thank you very much. Don't forget, you can ask your questions with the top right button on your screen, and we already have 3 questions for you, Mathieu, I think, because it's a bit focused on your startup. I think people are interested. I will go back to you with some of these questions, but now let's make a link between both of you, because it's very original, but CEA has its own investment structure. I may say partly CEA. You are directly connected to CEA, and you are here to help build financial issues for the startups.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for the invitation as well. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I think a lot has been said already. So maybe let me start where we are today, just very briefly. So today our name is now Supernova Invest. Used to be CE1 Investissement. We manage about a bit less than 500 million. We've invested in more than 100 companies. We're about 20 people between Grenoble and Paris, and we very much actually have a positioning which is linked to our history with the CEA. So what is called namely deep tech, so strong innovation, bringing to product and services competitive advantages, and obviously serving markets where there are major needs. And healthcare is really part, of course, of our activities, not the only part. So very much we match what has been said about the CEA previously. So activity in information technology, energy and environment, but also healthcare. And we believe, and we're quite different, I think, from other investment company. We like the fact that we are not specialized. We basically have teams who are ultra specialized, but we like the fact that we cover activities where today in innovation there's a lot of bridges, there's a lot of synergy, and there's a lot of innovation when you combine activities and sectors and technologies. So that's pretty much where we are today. But the story, like always, is a long story, and it's a story that actually started at the CA in 1999. And as I think Laurence already told the beginning of the story, the CA created a tool and was quite a pioneer in that way in order to support its startups, invest in its startups, launch them. So beyond the tool, there was, of course, the money, but beyond that, there's all the, the structure to accompany these startups that the CA had internally and continues to have internally. And where we come in the picture is we operate, if you will, that tool. It's now, an investment company. And from something that was super focused in the year 2000s on microelectronics and CA, started to be diversified in saying we need to also go on healthcare, on energy environment, and started to be further diversified in saying actually the model is really working very well. We are driving the innovation in France. Let's do it outside of the CA. And I think, again, the CA was, that's my opinion at least, very innovative in that it decided we should actually open that tool and let other investors also come in that tool in order to leverage what we can bring. So, there was this, and this is when we became independent in 2017. However, the CA is an extremely important sponsor. It's a shareholder. It's a sponsor of our funds. It's extremely present, and I think the links remain strong because there's amazing innovation in the CA, but I think also just because of human factors. You get to know people, you get to know how to work with them. You understand complementaries, and that we work in a very complementary way, basically. So, and yes, we did fund Theranexis, and we've got a very nice portfolio of startups in the healthcare in general.
So we have a great view of what happened to you, and it's good. And of course, links with industry, because you need industry and industry investments and interest in the startups you try to launch. And so I think that Ipsen and even Amgen are not really involved in some of your startups today, but maybe it could happen. And the idea of this conference, by the way, is to try to make bridges and to try to bridge between CEA, entrepreneurial spirits, and industry. This is the reason why we got some representatives here. We're not involved yet, but Catherine Georges, Vice President of Paris-Saclay R&D site of Ipsen, you are very much involved in this entrepreneurial spirit because you support startups and you work with startups anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks a lot to CA and Aris for organizing this conference. Very happy to be here today to talk about collaboration with startups. Ipsen is an international biotech company with French roots. We innovate in 3 main therapeutic areas, and that might build a link with CA, one being neuroscience, of course, but also oncology and rare disease. And entrepreneurship for us can be maybe summarized in 3 words that some of our colleagues here already talked about. First of all is the innovation. You need to experiment, and then you need to collaborate. And we already talked about cooperation or collaboration, and the collaboration means that in the ecosystem we need to be in an ecosystem of innovation when there are academic partners, startups, of course, to be able to share a common vision and find the partnership which is aligned with our vision, and ultimately the means which is to care about patient and bring the innovation to the patient. And we shouldn't forget about the fact that the best innovation is the one that goes to the patient.
So just to have a better idea of what you did exactly, last year you got 6 collaborations, 2 of them were French biotechs, that's right?
Yeah, so Ipsen rely strongly on external innovation, so collaboration with startups. So that's we have internal research in toxins. However, the other innovation is coming through our collaborative partnership with startups, and hence the reason why we are here today, I guess. And we our research center are really based where innovation is in ecosystem of innovation, such as Paris-Saclay. Our French R&D center is in Courtabœuf, but also Boston and Oxford in the UK. And really, the Boston area is an ecosystem where it's easy to partner with academic and startups. So it's in some way it's a bit of a model for us that we would like to be extended to other places such as France, of course.
Of course, and let's of course say a little hello to Boston, which is connected with us. The same kind of spirit for you, Corinne Blachy-Poisson, General Manager at Amgen. You also use and I like the ecosystem, the general ecosystem. You even have a investment fund, which is Amgen Venture. So of course you are very close to startup spirit too.
Yes, thank you. So thank you to the organizers for inviting me. Of course, the Amgen was a startup 42 years ago. Huh? It was.
Let's remember.
Yeah. So because when I'm listening to the stories from these startuppers, I am also. Resonates for an Amgen person because we are always listening to the story of these 2 biologists who were from the UCLA University, and they were believing in the potential of biology for developing drugs, which was very innovative at that time. And today, of course, we have nothing to do with a startup because it's more than 20,000 of staff, employees over the world, 25 billions of sales. But
it makes you dream, no?
So it's a perfect example of a success story. It's probably the biggest success story in all biotech. Yeah. Still, I am trying in my affiliate, because I am the general manager for the French affiliate, I am trying to keep this startup mindset, which is really definitely something kind of a spirit that I think is different from the big pharma. So now our headquarters are still close to the UCLA University and still very close to all the US ecosystem, which is extremely rich of many, many companies. Now they have always been collaborating with many companies, and today our portfolio of commercialized drugs is 50% made of in-house drugs and 50% of external opportunities, external contract drugs which have been acquired during different phases of development. So this is a permanent search for interesting platforms, and mainly in the US, but there are also activities of business development in Europe. And this is, so we have 2 types of activities. As you mentioned, Amgen Venture, which is looking at any type of investment from a financial point of view, what can be interesting in the healthcare area, and the business development, which is looking at opportunities for the 3 therapeutic areas, which are currently, because it can evolve, but it doesn't evolve every 6 months, oncology, inflammation, and cardiology, metabolism. And of course, for example, for cancer, we can be interested in any research in the pathogenesis of a disease, of any research on biomarkers in many in different types of cancer genomics. So we have a large, a very broad search of companies which can be interesting for different aspects of our research and development.
So it leads to a question, and for you too, Katrina. Were you aware of the opportunities and what is possible to do with CA today, and through examples we saw through platforms in which we are, for example, today in Eurospin?
So we started effectively to search for collaborations in France only 2 years ago, and of course CA was on our list. But I can really say that today.
Why so lately? Why did you wait so late to invest in France?
In fact, we are very active in development activities, clinical research, which is very classical. Now we are a very US-centric company, I must admit. So this is why we thought with the European management that it was the right time to leverage the French ecosystem as in other European markets, that it could be the right moment now to look at some opportunities, and because also this is why it's so important to have positive signals from the governments and I think that communication like the CIS 2030 is quite positive communication towards the US companies' headquarters to say, okay, healthcare is really a strategy priority for our industry, for our markets, for our healthcare system. We have to invest. We invest locally and we are open to collaboration.
Does it mean that you pay great attention to the current national election in France?
Yes, of course.
It could change some of your priorities and choices?
I hope that the CIS 2030 will stay the same and that we will keep doing what has been decided, because we cannot change things every 5 years. It's a long-term vision which is required, and people who keep doing what has been decided. Not spend time talking about what we should do, but do things that we have decided to do.
And what about you, Catherine, about the CA and the general French spirit?
So CA is well known in France. This is known as a center of excellence in science, in technology. This is absolutely clear. It's an area where it's a center where you bring biologists, engineering, but it's seen, at least for Ipsen, it was seen more as an area where you bring up startup in the engineering field, or in the diagnostic field, or in the imaging field, than in pharma business. In reality, even though Terra Nexus is well known in France as one of the very successful startup that was that took roots from CA. So we have collaboration with CA, but not through startups. Much more on what can we use in the research biology field, in neuroscience for imaging, preclinical model, immunology, where also CA is well known. But it's until recently. It was not the main. It's the main area where we were looking for startups, but it is changing for sure.
It's changing now. So just at the end of the day, you will sign a few contracts, if I understand correctly. So Mathieu, there was a question about the French ecosystem, but you get some questions from the US. I think it must be from Boston. Thank you, Boston, for answering for questions. How do you work with the US ecosystem?
Okay, so thank you for the question. So I think perhaps it's one way to think about what happened at the beginning of the company. So we were scientists. We had this technology. We were thinking to develop drugs in neurological disorders and to push them on the American market at the end, because we know that in neurology, the majority of the market is in the States. So at this time, we were trying to put the drugs towards clinical, toward industrial standards, but we had no idea that even those standards exist at this time. And I think it's complex for entrepreneurs to try and learn by doing just alone. So at this time, we recruited plenty of people that knew how to develop drugs and how to push them in the development in Europe and in American country. And for us to work with the US ecosystem is, and I will take the example of our first drug, which is a drug dedicated to Batten disease, which is an orphan disease. We are only developing this drug in the States for the moment. So we've taken the drug. It's a new license, as you mentioned. It's a license from an American foundation. We put the drug to industrial standard, meaning we've done all the toxicology profile and so everything to be able to discuss with the FDA at the good level, with the good level of interaction. So we have different kind of US-based experts to help us on that. We were able to get the IND, which is the green light to test the drug in a clinical development by the American system. And now we are testing the drug in patients. We've included different kind of patients which are over 17 years old in this indication. And so it's kind of an ongoing process with the US system that we are discovering and working with.
Okay, there are some other questions for you. We'll go back to you, but we talk about the US and Laurence Petit, the problem is that very often we hear that startups in France have to be founded with US companies or sometimes from abroad, but it's very hard and difficult to get funded in France. So it's a question for both of you. So how do you account for that? What's the problem with this spirit and the aim at investing in France by French companies sometimes?
Well,
don't struggle, don't fight. Yes.
I'll take over.
Okay, I can start and
okay.
Celia will go on. Well, yes, obviously, it is a real concern in France, in particular for technological startup, because they need a lot of money for a long time in order to develop their business. I would say that concerning the first steps for the early stage for first fundraising, I would say that the situation has clearly improved for several years. It's still an issue, but I think we can say that the situation is really better. I think there is still an issue for industrialization because the money to go to industrialization they need really a big amount of money. And for instance, we have, just to give you an example, we have a quite successful startup at CA, which is called Lydia, but it's not in the healthcare, it's on wireless technology, but they opened their first factory in the southeast of France recently, and they have to raise around 300 million euros to do so. So that's the amount of money that is needed. So I think maybe there is an issue on the industrialization for technological startups today. And I think it's more or less the same in all technological fields, including health.
It's important to get a great deal of money, so it's difficult to find it in France, or essentially in France, and to keep finally the intellectual property and patents and to remain French. What about your, I think, 236 startups, that's it, you created in CA?
Yeah, more or less.
More or less.
Yes.
Okay, and so you co-built from some of them, and you helped finance lots of them. What about this issue? What about investment from US, from France, difficulties you have?
Well, I think I agree with Laurence. I think things have improved a lot in France over the last probably 20 years. First of all, I think investment has become much more professional. and has caught up actually with US and I would say probably UK practices, because it was the most advanced kind of country in Europe. So it has progressed, has become more professional, and there's many more funds, and not only what we call equity, so funds to invest in capital, but France has an amazing tool of public funding. I mean, what people never talk about is the fact that people come to France actually because you have tax kind of advantages when you create a startup on R&D, and you also have all sorts of non-dilutive funding. So basically, it's loans or grants that allow you to start. So I think to start a company, the ecosystem in terms of I would say money is quite amazing. Further down the line is true. Maybe we need more money on industrial phases. That's true. However, I mean, there's been some actually massive investment funds raised recently in the healthcare, like JETO or LSP. These are European funds. You're talking about funds of 500 million to 1 billion. So, I think Europe in general is catching up. And then anywhere, I think, especially in the healthcare, companies almost become international from day one. You may do your seed fund with French investors because there's proximity, and I think the culture is very important at that moment, because you have to, to build something, to build a team. But once you start raising further down the line, Series Bs or Series C, then very naturally, anyway, the company's business itself is becoming international, starts to do clinical trials abroad, and then you start having investors that come from the US or from other European countries. So it is anyway also quite an international landscape, in terms of where the money comes from, but also where the business is done. But I would say the starting ingredients are pretty good in France.
Mm. And do you have, both of you, do you have an agenda? Do you know how much money will be invested in future startups or for external projects within a few years, 5 years maybe? Catherine?
Yeah, of course, we know. We have BD, and we know how much we want to invest. It's several billion that we will invest over the next few years, and we have started already in the past year. I think the question about investment and the fundraising is clearly that in the US there are more money than there are in Europe. But again, I agree with you. It's getting better, and we are seeing progress over the past, I would say, 2 years around the fact that we'll have a higher level of investment than we had in the past in Europe. And I agree, at a certain level of development of a drug, it's an international business. So we have to be competitive in Europe, I would say, rather than in France. We have to be competitive against the rest of the world, and it's not only the US, it's also Asia and so on.
Corinne?
Yes, we have we intend to invest a lot in the coming years, but these are quite confidential data. No, I was just thinking that it's very important for a startup to think internationally quite very early in the development. And today, one of the main challenges is how to develop, once we start the clinical development, how to manage the appropriate development for the US market, which is still the biggest one, probably declining in his wage internationally, globally, still the biggest one, and with the European markets. And this is quite now we, in the last 20 years, the European markets have been integrated progressively, I would say, because of the EMA establishment. Now we still have an access process different from one country to another. we cannot underestimate that the US market is extremely fragmented for the access. And the trend in the US is in fact just the same as it is in Europe in the last 20 years. I mean, they are discovering what access means in the US. Mm-hmm. So they are learning from Europe. So today still the priority from a regulatory point of view is to get approval from the FDA because it gives regulatory access to the biggest market. The EMA is also the second one, and it's a benchmark for many other countries, which can be aligned. And then getting the price in the European market is also the first step for other markets. So I think there is a kind of convergence still between the US and Europe, with, for the moment, a lot of advantage for the US markets.
Okay, thank you. Well, the roundtable is nearly over, but I've just got a few questions for you if you can answer very briefly. So one of the questions from people connected, what is your intellectual property policy?
It's a very classical IP policy. It's an IP based on the protection of the drugs in specific indications. So it's very classical IP protection for our drugs. And technologies are protected more with the know-how protection, meaning no IP, no patent, but just know-how that is with the scientists working with us in the academic lab and the scientists for the company.
Another question, do you have any application hospitals for your technologies on the Saclay plateau?
We are more and more working on rare neurological disorders and interested in teams working on those indications in which we might test the drugs that we are developing. So if we have teams working on rare neurological disorders, I'm glad to work with them.
And the last question, very open. What can we bring you from the US?
I think it's a question for everyone. I think it's for everyone. Perhaps just for me to think, perhaps experienced people, because I think we are lacking people knowing how to develop drugs in the States. It's very specific, and I'm sure you know that much better than we are. So we need people who know how to do that. And the second one is perhaps money coming from the US, as you mentioned, because just another thing, because same company as Ternexus, it might be able to be on the market side with a 4 times, 5 times, 6 times more market size, meaning that if we want to discuss with American investors, companies like Ternexus, they are under the radar because we have a very small market size compared to American companies. So I think it's interesting because perhaps you might think of more of European companies because you are able to buy innovation at a much lower price than in American companies. So it's an open just for you to come in Europe.
Thank you, Mathieu Charveria. Thank you to all of you for participating. Laurence Petit, Célia Hart, Corinne Blachier-Poisson, Catherine Georges. Thank you very much for this first roundtable. Now we can step into the second part of the conference. State-of-the-art innovative and health research infrastructure. And like we did for the first part, we're going to have a few video reports to enhance what is possible to do with CEA and especially platforms. And the first video report is about cutting-edge research in imaging with Fauzi Boumesber and Jean-Robert Devers, Jean-François Mangin, to express all about these imaging capacities here.